networking sites or blogs or anything like that that you guys were putting out there, web-based or other things in person or
Not
print?
too much internet-wise. Granted, this was starting 14 years ago, so the internet environment was a lot different.
Right.
But we would oftentimes do community lectures where we would sort of have a little open house and do a little community lecture I would do, or I would go to a newcomers club and do a little lecture, or go to the YMCA and talk to YMCA members. And so we would sort of do community outreach through sort of community-based lectures and question and answer sessions, but we didn't do too much online. And that may be, part of that was that two of the other management members weren't real comfortable online, and the other part of it is most of our demographics, being Medicare age, weren't really savvy to computers.
Right.
So that probably had a lot of bearing as to why we didn't really go too much into the internet world.
And do you think that with it being so long ago, do you think that you would have done things differently? Do you think that you would have had that kind of presence, that internet presence, where it's starting today?
I think now in this current environment, I think you need to have some sort of online presence. It may not have to be a huge footprint, but I think you need to have some sort of reference site where if people hear about you, they can at the very least go check you out.
Okay.
Online. And I mean, I think that should be a bare minimum, and integrating that into social websites would probably be a good thing as well. But I don't, and I certainly think that there's a lot of room for that and make it an interactive experience, and certainly help with paperwork and things like that.
What do you feel like has been your biggest challenge as a manager?
Biggest challenge as a manager, I think personally it was multitasking. You have to sort of be able to juggle 4 things at once. That took a little while to adapt to. You also have to be able to handle people differently. But I think that came a little easier as a clinician because you do that in the physical therapy world. Or any medical skill that you have, oftentimes you have to adapt your presentation and your skill and your attitude to the patient. You have to be very good at that with management, so that when you're dealing with employees or coworkers, you may have to approach one coworker one way and another coworker a very different way to get through to them. But juggling the coworkers and keeping people happy, that's a constant battle. And that would probably be the sort of professional challenge, would be making sure, in a small organization, it's very tight group. You need to make sure people are working closely together, but also getting along.
So it's more of a personal management of personalities kind of challenge than anything else.
Right. That's something that's sort of always there. There's always fires to put out and insurance problems to tackle, but those sort of come and go. But there's always an underlying awareness that you really need to have to be a good manager of the morale and the dynamics of the employees. You have to really keep a pulse on that.
Do you think that there are any policies or procedures or anything like that that you feel are really necessary that you would want to add to like a standard policies and procedures list or something in order to manage those personalities or deal with those things?
I think that if there's some sort of consistent opportunity to interact with employees, whether that's an office lunch every month, or a meeting once a month, or could be a happy hour after work once in a while, or I think you have to sort of be involved and communicate regularly with your employees and kind of, understand what's going on in their lives. And because a lot of times if they just show up at work and leave, you don't really get a feel for how they're doing. So, and if their performance drops or changes and you're not really aware of what's happening, you really don't have a lot of information to work on. So you're operating from a position of lack of information.
So one of the things you mentioned there was a happy hour after work, and that's one of the things that we kind of debated in one of our discussions in class is what should the relationship between employee and manager be like, and what type of manager do you think you would want to be? So can you speak to that relationship a little bit more?
It's important that, I think the dynamics are different in a small organization versus a large organization. I think in a large organization, the size and the city of the management may not allow you to sort of hang out after work all the time. But I think an additional get together, it may not be a happy hour, maybe lunch. It may be a group lunch hour, or it might be someone brings in breakfast around the coffee maker once in a while. And some dynamics, may not work at a happy hour. You may have a group of people that aren't particularly, feel comfortable or social in that environment, or don't drink, or may, not feel comfortable there. Then you have to find some avenue that works with your group where you can, talk. And I think it's helpful. I personally think it's helpful if that's done outside of work, where you can get a feel for how people are as people, not just employees. But in a group setting, I don't think it's particularly appropriate one-on-one, or where you're just having a happy hour with one or two particular individuals. Right. It's something you need to open up to the whole group and make it an occasional occurrence.
And how do you combine that type of relationship where you would get together with people outside of work and also address the tough situations without turning into the bad guy and having to deal with, like, he's the manager, we wouldn't want him at our happy hour kind of situations?
Well, I think if you can't connect with someone outside of work, they're less likely to view you as the bad manager or the boss. They view you as a person, just hopefully like you view them as a person. We've found, for instance, a way that we found for an interview process is we sort of had like a group interview, and you would sort of do lunch for the whole office as an applicant came in, and we sort of used that as the second interview process. And that was a way for group dynamics, the applicant kind of see group dynamics work, and the new applicant, can see, the way things are.
Yeah.
And that's, there again, probably, a large corporation, logistically, that probably wouldn't happen. But a small group, you can adapt to the size and the scope of your company.
I like that idea.
Yeah, it worked out well. Because, and also it gave the employees some input, so the employees could sort of get a feel for a potential new applicant, and it was sort of we found a win-win situation, because some people on paper look great, they just didn't click with the current group working in the office. So you wouldn't want to bring someone, even though they look great on paper, into the office dynamics and really upset the office communication and dynamics. So we found that was a really helpful way to do things.
Great. And also, I hear, this is totally switching subjects, but I hear that all the time that I'll be doing paperwork all day as a physical therapist, and that the evaluation portion and the paperwork portion is going to be overwhelming to me. It's going to be a big change, and I feel like as a manager there would probably be even more. Did you feel that way?
Electronic documentation, I think, will really help that. I think electronic documentation and computer programs definitely make the normal day-to-day physical therapist paperwork much more bearable and efficient. But there's always going to be, as a manager, there's always going to be extra work. And most likely, as a physical therapy manager, you're probably going to be seeing at least a partial caseload. In the larger corporations, typically, you're not going to see a full caseload and management duties. You're usually going to have, 50-50 clinical work management work, or 75-25, because there'll be a lot more human resources paperwork the larger the corporation is. So usually they'll balance that out. And I think electronic documentation will continue to improve, which will be a little more efficient when you're doing paper on the clinic side of things.
Okay.
So don't freak out. I don't think it'll be that bad.
Thanks. Do you think that there are some specific rewards that you found as holding a position as a manager?
Say that again?
Do you think that there are specific rewards that you got when working as a manager?
Yes, absolutely.
Are there pluses to all the added work?
Definitely made me a better, being a manager forces you to really improve your interpersonal communication with people and your efficiency with multitasking. I mean, those are things that you have to really be able to improve upon to be a manager. And those are things that serve you no matter what you do, whether that's, raising a family or going into a different job. Or, those skills are things that will stay with you once you really hone them as a manager.
Okay. Do you think that there are any pieces of advice that are additional that you could give me as a student about making the transition from student to physical therapist and moving up within a facility to a managerial position?
I think the bottom line is you have to really enjoy what you do.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds very cliche and redundant, but I've known a lot of therapists that climb up a corporate ladder and they're absolutely miserably unhappy because they're not working on people anymore.
Right.
They're full-time managers and don't get to work in the clinic with patients. And I've known other therapists that climb up the management ladder and they're so happy not to be working with patients anymore. So, I think you have to understand whatever your end goal is, I think it's important that you enjoy doing it. You have to, there's nothing wrong with taking on a challenge, but you want to take on a challenge so that you can do something that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people may lose sight of that in the process when they're sort of in the weeds of the day-to-day activities. So just gotta enjoy what you're doing.
I think that's the best advice.
Yeah, because management's not exactly for everybody.
Right.
So.
Well, thank you very much for your time with that. I appreciate it.
No worries. Hope it helps. I'm glad they're getting you a business class.
Me too.